The floor wasn't even dirty. I could see that from the doorway. Sunlight slanting through the kitchen window, hitting the smooth off-white tiles with that late afternoon glow that always made me feel like the house was holding its breath. But there she was, my daughter Willa on her knees with a yellow sponge clutched in her small hands, scrubbing the floor as though it were caked in filth that only she could see. She had a loose ponytail, wisps of hair falling over her flushed face, and her lips were pressed together so tightly it was like she was holding back the entire world's tears. She looked up at me the way a soldier might glance up at an oncoming shell, like she expected it to hit but had no choice but to keep working anyway. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, my voice rough from the hours of driving. I'd been on the road since Detroit, caffeine and stress keeping me wired enough to make it back 2 days early. I'd wanted to surprise her, maybe even get home in time to see that little grin of hers that always made the rest of the world fall away. But that grin wasn't there, just her eyes, wide and flat, like she was somewhere else in her head. She didn't cry. She didn't even tremble. She just looked at me and said, "I'm grounded." Then her head dipped, and she went back to scrubbing. I stood there, suitcase, still in my hand, letting the weight of that word, grounded, settle in. My wife's parents, Patrice and Gordon, had this way of deciding who belonged in their version of a family and who didn't. I'd seen it in the way they looked at me over dinner, in the way they'd treat my daughter like she was a tenant rather than a child. And Belle, my wife, she'd always said, "Just let them adjust. Give them time." But time was something I'd run out of the moment I saw my daughter on her knees like that, scrubbing a floor that didn't need scrubbing. "Where's Belle?" I asked, but it came out like a growl, a sound I barely recognized as my own. "Riverglide." Willa didn't look up. "They went to Riverglide." Her voice was soft, flat, like it was a fact she'd memorized. "Macy wanted to go." Macy, Belle's daughter, the one who was allowed to have the parties, the sleepovers, the birthday cakes with the sparkler candles, the one who got invited, celebrated, adored. I could already see her, cotton candy in one hand, screaming with laughter on the roller coaster, not even thinking about the sister she'd left behind. "They just left you here." My voice cracked, but I didn't let it show. I set the suitcase down gently and crouched beside her. The sponge in her hand was soaked, dripping sudsy water onto the tiles that gleamed without a single smudge. I reached out and put my hand on her shoulder. She flinched, like she wasn't used to being touched kindly. That nearly broke me right there. "They said I was grounded," she repeated. Because I forgot to put my shoes away, and I left a light on in the bathroom." Her eyes flicked up to mine, so blue, so serious. "I'm sorry." I swallowed hard, fighting back the anger that was building like a storm in my chest. "You have nothing to be sorry for," I said. "Nothing." Her eyes darted to the door as if she expected someone to burst through and scold her for not working fast enough. I felt my chest tighten with a rage I hadn't known I was capable of, the kind that made my hands curl into fists, even though I knew there was no one to hit but the past. "Put the sponge down, sweetheart," I said, my voice low but steady. "Come on, let's get your things." "But no," she started. "No," I interrupted, firm but gentle. "No more scrubbing floors. No more grounding for things you didn't even do. We're leaving." Her mouth opened in a small O of shock, like the concept of leaving hadn't even occurred to her. She set the sponge down slowly, her hands trembling. Now that she was allowed to stop, I helped her up. Her knees were red from the tiles. She leaned against me, and I felt her whole body sag in relief. I realized then that she hadn't cried because she hadn't been allowed to. Because if she did, she'd be weak, a target, the girl who always needed fixing, but she didn't need fixing. She needed saving. I guided her out of the kitchen, through the living room, where the TV was off, the air thick with the stale scent of lavender air freshener that tried too hard to smell like home. I saw Macy's backpack on the couch, a half-eaten cookie beside it, crumbs scattered like confetti. I wanted to crush it all, to shout at the walls that had witnessed every small betrayal. But instead, I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and Willa's small backpack with the fox keychain dangling from the zipper. She'd always loved foxes. They were clever, she'd said. Survivors. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I packed, because sometimes the loudest scream is the one you don't let out, and sometimes the strongest act of defiance is simply leaving. As I locked the front door behind us, I looked at Willa's face. She was watching me like I was a puzzle she'd never solved, like she wanted to believe I'd choose her, but couldn't quite trust it yet. I knelt and took her face in my hands, brushing the hair from her forehead. "I'm here," I said. "I'm always going to be here." She blinked hard, and I saw the tears start to form, but she nodded just once. And in that single motion, I felt like I'd finally done something right. We walked to the car together, the afternoon sun painting the world in gold and hope. I opened the passenger door for her, and she climbed in, clutching her backpack like a lifeline. I shut the door gently, like I was sealing us into something new, something safer. Then I got behind the wheel, turned the key, and pulled away from the house that had never been a home. I didn't look back, because the floor wasn't dirty, but the people who made her scrub it had stained everything, and it was time to wash that away, forever. Burning every bridge they'd built to keep us here. The week before, I came home to find Willow on her knees with that sponge in hand. Macy had her birthday party. Clowns, face paint, cake bigger than any kid should ever need, balloons in every color, and party favors that probably cost more than the gifts I'd been able to give Willa the past year. I'd watched the chaos from the kitchen doorway. Macy's friend shrieking with laughter, Gordon filming everything on his phone like he was documenting the second coming. Patrice beamed with pride, fussing over every detail. It looked like a small carnival, and Macy, in her sparkly dress, was the queen of it all. Willa, though, she'd been a ghost in the background, holding a plate of cake she hadn't asked for. I started from the crowd to me like she wanted to ask permission to breathe. Patrice caught her trying to blow out a candle. Just one, probably just curious, and she swooped in with that thin-lipped smile of hers. "Be helpful, sweetheart. But don't get in the way," she said. It sounded like a benediction, but it was a curse. Willa's face crumpled so slightly I almost missed it. Almost. But I saw the small flinch, the way her shoulders folded in on themselves. I wanted